Welcome to TLC for the Soul podcast, where soul meets spirit. You have entered into sacred space. I'm your host, Tammy Lynn Chambers, and I'm here to help you shine. Now let's get going on this podcast journey. Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. This is our first storytelling for February, and we are coming in with a continuation of Timbre. So this is Jamison, part 1. If you haven't been following the story, you might want to go back and listen to Timbre and I don't know. The story's evolving, that's all I can say. It started out, I thought, as a continuation of the Spectre and Book Coven series, which in a sense it is, but I never really know where these stories are going. Spirit brings them forth through me, the conduit. They're channeled and they're just done, via like automatic writing or stream of consciousness writing. So it appears to be turning into a story of the divine feminine and the divine masculine and a journey to their union as told through the stories of Timbre and Jamison. So if you are a divine counterpart, and even if you're not, if you're working on your own spiritual journey, your own spiritual, spiritualness, then it's a story for you as well, because there's a divine masculine and a divine feminine within all of us. So let's just get ourselves settled. This is a shorter story today, which, well, I guess it shouldn't surprise me, because sometimes the masculine is not one of many words, but the words that they do say are ones of great, can be of great importance and great emotion coming through. So for our new listeners, thank you for joining me here on the podcast. You'll find that there is a variety of things going on here. We have the monthly storytelling, the monthly energy update. It all works together as kind of a combined quote-unquote package of resources for you for the month. So if you haven't heard the February energy update, I would invite you to go back and listen to that. The topic this month is self-love, and everything else so far is playing into that. So we're doing divine feminine healing last week in our Healing Through Avalon series, and this week later on I'll be doing divine masculine healing episode, again for all of us. Returning listeners, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast. I think we may have many newcomers coming in. We are now available in many different spaces and places, and our newest podcast providers, where the podcast now lives, we are on Audible. We've been there for about a month now, and we just got added into iHeartRadio. So if you're coming from iHeartRadio, welcome so much to the TLC for the Soul podcast experience. Several days ago, I did some light language activations. If you're a starseed, and even if you're not, because there was earth-based light language, these were all to help you with your warrior spirit, help you to drop things that are no longer serving you, helping to release them and flesh them out, and then bring in some inner strength and inner power and spiritual strength for you, spiritual fire. So that was, I think, the podcast episode right before this one. So let's go ahead and get ourselves into our listening space. As always on the podcast, you choose your listening experience. If you're new here and you're not really sure what this is all about, then you may just want to settle in and just listen. Some people come, I think, and just listen for the story itself. Like, okay, it's just a story. Let's just see what happens from the beginning to the end. Others of you choose a deeper listening experience from more of like a higher perspective. And you can choose to set the intention to listen to the underlying meanings and metaphors coming through the story, because again, these are all channeled from source through the personas and the guides coming through each story, through me, the conduit. I'm just the one that writes them down as they share them with me. So there's meanings and metaphors and all that for everyone, and they are individual to you. The intention is always set that these are healing stories to uplift, enlighten, and bring you messages for your highest and best good. And then the third way you can listen is to invite in your spirit guides to surround you as you're listening to the story and share any updates or guidance or healing or anything else that might be needed by you in this now. As I'm doing, as I always do, I'm going to surround us in a divine circle of love, light, and light love, inviting in my guides. Oh, 2 hawks just flew by. Oh, union. I never see 2 hawks. I only see one every time I see one, and now there's 2 flying together. So every time I record these outdoors, I try to do the storytellings outdoors. It just depends on what's going on in the day. But we always have spirit animals or spirit messages. Well, all the time show up, but outdoors we have a lot of spirit animal stuff. All right, let me just turn that off. Always something. Mercury retrograde. Okay. So our guides are here surrounding us. We had 2 hawks fly by, and as I point things out, like spirit animals that show up, if you want to later on, you can go, Google or search or whatever for what those spirit animals might, mean for you and your journey. Before we get into Jamison, just a little recap of Timbre, since that was the divine feminine side of the story. And the way I'm going to do this now is, this one's so short, I'm going to read it all. It's 3 chapters. And then we'll talk about the messages from the divine masculine and for the divine masculine for this part of the story, what really came through. Timbre, she started out as this badass witch girl, part of the Spectre and Book Coven, working for the Bringers of the Light as one of their top agents. She's not from Earth. She's a starseed from somewhere. We don't really know where she's from, and at a high level, she was like this creature that kind of she takes care of herself. She's powerful. She's definitely a divine feminine source to be reckoned with. She's had some weird, kind of sad things happen in her past, and she kind of tries to forget all that. She doesn't really like to dive into anything having to do with the heart space. She's closed herself off from all of that because of her childhood, and and she sees Dakar and Abigail, who Dakar is one of the few people on Earth that will actually help her and wants to be friends with her because of her quote-unquote reputation, how she works. And she sees Dakar and Abigail, who are divine flame counterparts, and she's like, I think I might want something like that. Maybe I do. She has a familiar who's a hawk, who's really not a hawk. He's a guy, Jamison, who took on the role of being her familiar through the Bringers of the Light, and he is in his own right a very adept, very powerful agent of the light, but he was trying to get away from his relationships. He's very good looking and suave and debonair, and women just are always drawn to him, and he always got drawn into and took part in the wrong types of relationships for himself. And what he's realizing is, my heart space has been closed off, and maybe I want, more in my life. I want a relationship that's more of a love feeling and not, just something more superficial. And so he decides to not be a bird anymore, not to be a hawk anymore, and to go confront Timbre with who he really is. And they meet at the gravesite of Marie Laveau, And she doesn't recognize him at first, but the tsunami hits Tamber, and she's like, whoa, is that you, Jamison? And once he realizes, like, oh my God, I've been recognized, he like teleports himself far away because he's like, I don't even know what to say to her. And so we pick up with the Jamison in chapter 1. We kind of ended it there with Tamber kind of wondering like who she really was and kind of confronting some of her inner shadows. This was all like January for the Divine Feminine, confronting her inner shadows, really just realizing like she felt some weird tsunami of emotions when she saw Jamison, and she's like, what in the world is this? And she decides to just set all that aside. I told her I said at the end of those chapters of like she just checks out and she goes and hangs out with her like, guy of the moment who she kind of uses as a excuse to forget about, love, because he's just, some guy that she kind of has a good time with. And they go on this astral journey using this flying ointment, and they're going to hang out in Mars or whatever. I don't know, wherever they're going to go hang out and hook up. So let's get into Jamison, and where we left off with him is he teleported himself far away. He's like, okay, I just have to forget all about Tamber. I don't know what to do with these feelings. And so we drop in now. If you're ready, let's take a deep breath. That was a lot of an explanation. And we come into chapter 1, the Equinox. Jamison found it difficult to concentrate in this higher vibrational space. He had teleported to the outer belts of the Milky Way, a space he had visited often as a child when his family would go off and leave him alone. His upbringing was strange, and his fondest memories were of his mother and the treks she would take him on through the jungles and the forests of Midvale. If only he had known how short his time with her would become, he would have been more present on those outings. She had literally disappeared on his 5th birthday, and he had spent the rest of his life in denial that she had even existed, even telling himself on several occasions that he had been hatched from a dragon's egg and cared for by a family of earth dragons on the upper coast of the moors. Time had sealed over the wounds, but had never healed them. Jamison traveled light, and his backpack was filled with cherry pies he had picked up at the nearest galactic coffee shop before jettisoning himself further out. If he could get far enough away, then maybe the memory of her would dissipate, fade away completely even. But such was not the case, and even when he tried asking a space wizard for help to extract the thoughts of her from his brain, the old wizard only laughed and tapped him gently on the heart space. "It's a hard thing to lose the one you love," the grizzled wizard said, recalling the one he had purposely let get away. "You never forget," he said, blasting off on his second-hand broomstick into the wetlands of Sirius B. Jamison was left holding his bagel in one hand and his heart on his sleeve in the other one. He ached, both with her and without her. What was he to do now? He tried everything he could think of to forget her, but why, he didn't understand. His mother's face prompted him to punch his bagel right in its perfectly centered hole. To heck with it, he thought. I might as well drink this pain away. He recalled that's what got Tamber into trouble most times and decided against it. He astral projected himself into her vicinity, but just far enough away so she wouldn't sense him there. The old pain returned when he saw her and Clive laying on the floor together holding hands. She was far away from her body. Maybe for the best, he thought, as he lowered himself into the jacuzzi waters of the Outer Realm Spa and Geisha House. I guess I'll just soak my troubles away, he decided. A beautiful star child of the Outer Realms eyed him through the steamy glass of the room he was in. Removing her robe and picking up her basket of magical delights, she entered the room and quietly slipped into the water beside him. So I do want to stop right there and say, like, what? He just said he wasn't going to mask his emotions, and he wasn't going to check out like Tamar had done, and now he's checking out. So I feel like earlier, or the beginnings of this month or whatever, like the masculine and the feminine were both kind of checking out to to face their shadows, face their demons, face their fears, I guess, about this relationship and what it might mean. And so they both kind of like just, I don't know, went into their heads basically. And the masculine kind of goes on this, I really felt this a few days ago, like the masculine had checked out and had gone on this like bender or something and was just out there to forget. And then, was it 2 days ago maybe? When I channeled chapter 2, I was like, okay, he seems to be coming out of it now. He seems to be kind of waking up to the fact that, this is not going to work. So now we go into chapter 2, morning after. Jamison awoke with a start. His head was pounding and his stomach felt like a firecracker had imploded inside. What had he done last night? His vision fuzzy and protecting his energy from the woozy, dizzy feeling that had overcome him, he sat up. He was alone. Again. He put the night's lovemaking and drunken excess behind him and pulled on his clothes. The geisha was gone, and he was able to move about and pick up his things. What was he doing? Why was he running like this? He definitely couldn't keep up this pace for long. He needed to find Tamber and make a fresh go at it. What could it hurt? She could always say no, but what if she said yes? His heart jumped and his stomach turned. Got a plan, he thought. I can't just come bumbling in with no clear vision. I have more to offer than that. I'm not just some guy. I'm the guy who felt the tsunami when I looked at her. Yeah, I'm that guy, he reminded himself. The badass special agent who works for the Bringers of the Light. I'm not some fly-by-night guy with flying ointment, he thought with distaste of Clive and his petty wants. He wanted more than a one-night stand. He wanted all of her. But at the thought of her again, he balked. But what if? He reminded himself that he couldn't stay away from his work forever either. This running and drugging his mind with silly erotica and drinks couldn't last forever. Could it? His guides reminded him that he was in control. He had the power. He wanted another drink, but forced himself to the coffee that had been placed there earlier in the day. They thought of everything at this place, he said to himself with gratitude. There was a knock on the door, and his geisha friend entered, using her charm to suggest a bath and possibly more. He winced. This was so silly. He wanted to go home. But where was that? He'd been running for so long he wasn't sure. I need to think, he said out loud in the native tongue of the outer realms. The geisha suggestively held out her hand. Screw this, he thought, pulling on his robe and slippers and padding out of the room. He left a 50 on the dresser by the door and went to the locker room to dress. He'd had enough. He was returning to the scene of the crime, so to speak. He was going home. So a decision has been made, it seems like. And when it's going home, it's like so like literal and metaphorical at the same time. Feels like he doesn't know where home is. So where is he going? What is his home? What is that? We don't really know. Like that's kind of the conundrum going through the masculine, I think, at this point in time is like, where is home? What does that feel like? Who's my home with? So chapter 3, this is our last chapter, is You've Changed Me. Jamison teleport. Oh, and just so before I go there, You've Changed Me. So I got kind of like not stuck yesterday, but I wanted to write this 3rd chapter yesterday, which was Saturday night for me. And Spirit was like, just wait. Like it just didn't feel like the right time, and I was getting sleepy and everything. And I went to sleep, and I had I'm doing a lot of like root chakra work right now, and I do that work right before I go to bed. And in the sleep time this last night, I released like a ton of fear. Like it was just something I probably could not have released in my waking state. Like it just felt like an overwhelming amount of fear energy came out, and then the angels came and took it away as I was like dreaming it. And I woke up, and all of a sudden I was like, okay. And Spirit was like, you need to write the 3rd chapter now. Because we always do 3 chapters. There's the power of 3. We always typically do 3 chapters when we do these storytellings. And what came out right after that was, after all that fear energy was released, was this chapter, You've Changed Me. And it was written at 3 in the morning. I have to say that it was written at 3 in the morning, my time. Jamison teleported right into the room. He placed his hand on her heart, and he wished her home. Tamber, deep in the oceans of Mars, was suddenly overcome with a willingness to do good and to feel love. It originated from deep in her heart, a place she had long forgotten about. Her tendrils, the part of her that had been placed around herself for protection, shed themselves into the ocean. She wept into the dark red waves. Something was calling her home. She felt him. It wasn't Clive. It was something bigger and more profound. She willed herself back to her body, and when she opened her eyes, he stood before her. The tsunami jumped into her throat, and she was unsure whether to laugh or cry, so she decided to do both. Clive, being jolted back from his deep dreams, entered the room at the sound of almost hysterical laughing and crying. What the heck, he thought to himself. How did this guy get in here? But he didn't have time to react, as in one swoop, Jamison gathered Tamber in his arms and fled out of the room. He flew up and up into the night, and still he did not let go. She tried to shift, tried not to feel the feelings of deep and unending love that were now pouring through her at the sight of him. She started to say his name, but he shushed her. "Where are we going?" she asked him, slightly discombobulated from the flying ointment and the feeling of his strong arms. "I'm taking you home," he said. "My home." Okay. So, we can look at this 3 ways. Oh, 3 ways. One is it's just a story, right? And it's kind of evolving and it's happening. And it's, if you're just looking at it as a story, it's like, wow, it's very fantasy land, kind of an interesting story. And if you're a divine, you're coming to union with yourself, so you're not on a divine counterpart journey. This is all about you coming into alignment with your inner divine feminine, divine masculine, coming home to yourself within, opening up your heart, allowing those emotions to come out that feel like a tsunami, that you feel. I think sometimes people feel like if I open my heart and I work on these wounds and these things that I've been holding on to for so long, that I'm just going to get engulfed by them and not be able to pull myself out of that. And you can ask for support from your angels and your guides or whoever you work with in the spirit realms, God, Jesus, whoever it is, to come in and help support you as you work through some of these things. And it seems like right now what is mostly coming through is fears about opening the heart to love in all its forms and getting away from some of these superficial emotions about what love is, what it is to feel divine love, to feel divinely protected and watched over and supported on your journey to becoming the best you that you can be. That's what I see when I look at Tamber and Jamison from that perspective. If I look at it from the perspective of divine counterparts, however you want to label that, I try not to label it anymore, but some people call it twin flames, twin rays, divine. You're going to hear so much, but I just like to call it like the one. Like this is your one. And if I look at it from that perspective, then it looks like the union is definitely moving forward. The feminine, in this case Tamber, has faced some of her fears. She's released a lot of emotion. She's cried a lot of tears. She's dealt with a lot of shadows. Jamison, the same thing, although they both tried to check out for a little bit and kind of deny that part of themselves that realized I feel something more for this other person, and it feels really big, and I don't know what it is, and I want to reach out, but what if the other person doesn't reciprocate my feelings? What's going to happen? All these fears coming up, and then finally, I think in this case, the masculine is coming towards the feminine, and the feminine gets to be the one to receive and allow, and then finally, Jamison is all the what ifs aside, I've got to do something. I can't just sit here. I guess I can just sit here, but spirit is there. Angels, I talked about this yesterday or the other day on Instagram. I don't know what day it was, but that there's a hierarchical thing happening with divine counterpart unions right now, and they're all being divinely supported and guided from the higher realms, the angelic realms, and the higher realms of masters and so forth, for divine power couples unions to come into union in the 3D on Gaia at this time for this new earth now in this golden age. And at some point, it's going to be for the masculine, who's the one coming forward and taking all the risks to move towards the feminine. At some point, it's like, okay, you kind of got to like get off the pond, like let's go, let's do this. Like they're getting nudges from source now, like it's time. You've done as much thinking about it as you can. All the what ifing in the world is not going to help you. It's only going to lower your vibration. You're in control. You're in your power. And even if you come forward and your feminine's like, I truly doubt, because you all are divine counterparts, you're twins, you're of the same emanation of light. When you came from source, you came from source together, and then you split off. It's just like twins, like you feel each other, you know each other, you understand each other's feelings, you feel each other's feelings, like physically in your body. It's just an experience that's hard to explain to anybody that does not have this, because it's not for everyone. It's not always, it doesn't always happen for everyone. There's not always a twin soul for every single emanation of light. It's just, I think this fear of rejection has to be set aside, because if you're feeling the tsunami, then your counterpart is feeling it too. And there's no way on God's green earth that if you approach your counterpart and share from the heart that you're going to get rejected. What you seek has been seeking you. And the other part of this person is really waiting for you to come, even if they do have fears about, like, well, what happens when we do come into union? Like, yada, 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 all the physical 3D stuff starts to play out. Like, what about my karmic partner? What about my family or my home? Blah, don't go there. Just, it's time to, like, unite. And then you're a power couple. You can decide how to take care of all of the earthly realm 3D stuff. This union is divinely guided and divinely supported the entire way. There'll be no missteps. Every step is an opportunity to learn and to grow together in your union. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. Thank all of our guides for joining us here, all the messages that have been shared, all the divine counterparts that are out there that have yet to come together, because there's many power couples going to be coming together within the next 4 years or so. So if you feel like, yeah, that's the journey that I feel like is for me, but it's maybe not for me right this moment, like, don't give up working on yourself. Don't give up working on your union and your partnership. And when I come back next week for the Divine Masculine part of the Healing Through Avalon series, we're going to be talking about more about how how the counterparts can work together to strengthen the bond between them, whether you're in union, coming into union, reunion, or you don't even have any idea who the heck your counterpart is, but you just know there's this one love out there for you somewhere. So again, I want to thank everyone for listening. I'm going to end this podcast here, and we will see you all again in the next episode. Take care. Thank you for listening to this podcast. It has been brought to you by the Bringers of the Light, an etheric group of higher light beings focused on service to Gaia, humanity, and the self as it pertains to the spiritual journey. So they are here to support you on your path to love and to working with others. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.